All right, and joining me now is Charlie Pierce, writer-at-large for Esquire magazine and political blogger for Esquire.com. Okay, so Charlie, as a tactic, I mean, the Koch brothers obviously spending lots of money to influence elections, to influence the outcomes in politics, but Charles Koch claiming, you know what, all he wants to do is get a little freedom. Did that ring true to you in that op-ed?
No, absolutely not. I mean, this is a guy he says he wants to get a little personal liberty, but he's funding voter suppression all over the country at the state level, which is where the mischief really gets done. The Americans for Prosperity, he's just most recently meddled in a mass transit issue in Nashville. These are, you know, a liberal sparrow does not fall from the sky that these people don't know about.
And of course, this is also a group that the two brothers, Charles and David Koch, have funded, ALEC, et cetera, who've been very much involved in voter ID. But one of the other tactics that you've seen from the Koch brothers is actually now encouraging their employees, Koch Industries employees, to get out there and become part of the PR machine to remake the Koch image. Sent out an email urging employees to share the op-ed piece by the boss, just as that Senator Jerry Moran did. What do you make of that as a tactic, trying to get an army of Koch employees to say the Kochs are all right?
Well, I think it's funny considering that elsewhere in the op-ed he was explaining how Koch Industries have really don't have any problem with unions and what % of their workforce is unionized, and of course this is the kind of thing that would never happen in a union plant. So this is equally amusing.
I mean, one of the arguments that Charles Koch makes in the op-ed is that, you know, he tried to get out their message about liberty and freedom just through education, but we're sort of forced into going into the political process over the last few years, I guess because collectivists bullied them into it. What do you make of that?
Well, I thought that whole thing was interesting because if you were wondering whether or not the two Koch brothers had learned enough from their father, who was a charter member of the John Birch Society, you can wonder no more, because that entire paragraph comes straight out of the old Bircher literature in the 1950s and the 1960s. It's just updated with, it's just updated now with the fortune that they built upon the fortune they were handed when they were born.
And you know, it's interesting that you mentioned that, the Bircher sort of language, because I was struck by the extent to which this op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal really kind of sounded like all of the Tea Partiers in my Twitter thread. A lot of the same language, the Saul Alinsky stuff, the collectivist stuff, the language sort of Tea Partyism. I mean, did it strike you the same way that they've begun to, or at least Charles Koch sounds really exactly like kind of the Tea Party that they fund?
Well, it's interesting because I think this goes back to what Harry Reid's trying to do with the use of the Koch brothers in a political context. Conservatism, modern conservatism, movement conservatism have been really good at creating conjuring words for their base that really, you know, all they have to do is say them. Alinsky, Benghazi, Acorn. I'm sure the people at Acorn who used to work for Acorn are finding it hilarious that Charles Koch finds himself put upon as a political symbol. The right has been very good at creating political symbols that are durable for political purposes within their own base. And I think that's a little bit, Harry Reid is trying to turn Koch brothers into a conjuring spell for Democrats, and I think he's doing it.
And just lastly, you know, you said speaking to the base, and obviously this was an op-ed that doesn't seem to be aimed at persuading people who now do not believe the Koch brothers to be awesome. It definitely was speaking directly to the base. How does that counter what Harry Reid is trying to do, which is trying to speak to the larger public about who the Koch brothers are in his estimation?
Well, I think that, you know, I mean, there's a fine line between, you know, rousing the rabble and educating the base, and I think Harry's doing a little bit of both. But I mean, the difference between the two, of course, is that Harry is starting from a deep hole because he doesn't have the megaphone and he doesn't have the right-wing media bubble to magnify and to strengthen the conjuring words like Benghazi or Alinsky or Acorn. He doesn't have the media infrastructure yet to do that, but I think he is trying.
All right, Charles Pierce from Esquire. I think the phrase of the day is the conjuring words. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Joy.